So I am going to introduce Robert Brady, and in order to be accurate, I just stole the facts off the Strimmel Gallery website because I figured they'd get it correct. The Strimmel is one of several galleries that carries Robert's work. Another gallery that's carrying his work is Bisakata Garo. He's going to have a show there the entire month of November. The reception is November the 6th, so you're certainly welcome to attend. The Strimmel Gallery website says he's a Bay Area sculptor, which I kind of object to that because I like to think of him as ours. I mean, he taught at Sac State for 33 years. That should count for something. He's got a piece in the Crocker collection. He's exhibited in local galleries. So I kind of think of him as ours, but whatever. They're welcome to their opinion. He was born in Reno the same year I was. 1964. Oh, wait, that's 46, sorry. He attended the California College of Arts and Crafts and then went to the University of California, Davis, and he got his MFA there in 1975. So he's lectured and taught workshops nationally and internationally as well as Sac State. He's got, as I mentioned, he's got a piece in our museum, the DeRosa Preserve, in Napa, LA County Museum of Art, Oakland Museum of Art, and SF MoMA. So with that, Robert, are you here? Yes? Okay.
I've probably done a talk about my work 100 times, I don't know, but every time I get really nervous, so it never seems to go away. But in response to William saying that he'd prefer if I could be called yours or ours, Sacramento-based or whatever. My experience with the Kingsley Art Club actually goes back almost 60 years. I used to enter the Kingsley Art competitive show every year for many, many years. Back in the 70s and late 60s, my former mother-in-law was part of the Kingsley Art Club. And Susan Willoughby, who's here tonight, has been part of the Kingsley Art Club, I'm quite sure, for decades and decades and decades. And I met her nearly 60 years ago as part of that whole women's group that ran the Kingsley Art Club. So I have a lot of respect for the history of what they've done and all the shows I was in. And actually, my connection to the Crocker also is pretty deep because of all those competitive shows I entered. And then I had solo shows here. I had a large survey show of ceramic sculpture that looked at 20 years prior of ceramic sculpture. And I'll get into that a little bit when I start talking here. But anyway, thank you so much for inviting me. Sometimes I feel humble about that. And about 10 years ago, I think I did the same exact talk in the same exact room for the Kingsley Arts Club. So if you were here before, it's going to be kind of redundant because, my story is my story. And but anyway, I will start here. This is a picture of a club I started in high school. When I was in 11th grade, I contracted an illness called Reiter's syndrome, and I was consequently in bed for 6 months. That was actually misdiagnosed. We learned later on they thought I had rheumatic fever, so they were protecting my heart against injury, but it was something else. And there's 3 symptoms, the worst being an arthritic kind of condition in my limbs. But anyway, I couldn't go to school that year, so when I went back I took some classes with a homebound teacher, but when I went back to school in my senior year, I had to load up on all the solids, had no electives, no study hall, and feeling a bit stressed out academically, I dropped an algebra class for a craft class. Because somebody said, just go over and take this craft class, you can just mess around and you'll get a B, So I went in this room, and the guy at the top of this pyramid here is named Thomas T. Tucker. And he was only 2 years out of California College of Arts and Crafts in Oakland, California. So his he was a new teacher at a brand new high school. This high school opened up in 1963, and this is 1964 here. So when I went into this room and transferred from algebra to crafts, about a third of the year was gone in my senior year. And this room was bustling. We're just looking at the corner that was ceramics, but the room was bustling with other crafts like enameling, copper and baskets and this and that. And he took me over to this corner. He took a bag of clay out and put it on that counter. Of course, the counter was clean, and a rolling pin, and said, "Make a slab-built pitcher." And he just walked away. That's all he did. No tools, nothing else, and ignored me. And at the end of the it's a 50-minute period, and I'd lost some time getting over there and giving him my little transfer shit. And at the end of that 50 minutes, the bell rang, and I had a pitcher made that had whatever, it was complete. Had a spout, had a handle, had a lid, and I was so in love with what I saw before me that I took it and I put it on that shelf way up there high where there's a couple objects next to Thomas C. Tucker, and I put a plastic bag over it, and I jumped down, ran off to my class, and between every other class during the day, I'd sprint back to the craft room, jump up there, pull the bag off, and just look at it and just rub it with a sponge. And I can't tell you, it was just a profound experience for me to have created this thing. And so I fell in love with ceramics. Then I told my friends, I said, "Hey, this is really fun. Let's create a club." So I started this pottery club. And there we are. And our teacher would stay after school 2 days a week until about 10 or 11 at night, and we'd just make pots, and then we had a pot sale and whatever. They created a new award at the awards assembly for Craftsman of the Year, and I got that. So, all of a sudden, I was excelling at something in a way that I had never excelled at anything else, and loving it as well. He talked me into going to art school. I was not planning to do that at all. I thought I'd be a car salesman or something like that, or work in the gambling industry. So I went away to Arts and Crafts in Oakland, and I just want to preface all this junk I'm going to show you with the fact that I've been making things for about 60 years and at a pretty high rate of production. And there's a lot of variety in my work, so much so that, of course, I'm criticized for that sometimes, but because of that, I have to edit out even large groups of work that I'd like to show you, but I just can't without it being too chaotic and too long. So I'm going to jump beyond undergraduate school and into graduate school at UC Davis. And I spent most of the time there building these structural pieces. This is just one. This is out on the lawn for a photograph. It's like 27 feet wide. There's 60 units that are 2 feet by 2 feet by 1 foot high. They're all ceramic, no other materials. And anyway, so that kind of typifies the direction that I did in graduate school. And somewhat later, after graduate school, I went back to a similar connection or interest, but these pieces were objective, meant to suggest something. This is a blouse called blouse. It's about 6 feet tall. This is kind of a serpent, a stylized serpent form, not unlike an Aztec kind of design. It's about, 12 feet wide. I moved out to Tennessee to help start a school, took a leave of absence from Cal State University. After grad school at Davis, I got a job teaching at CSUS and taught there from 1975 until, 33 years later, whatever that was. I've been retired now for so long I can't remember when I retired. There's a lot of things I can't remember. So anyway, this is a clay figure, And I started utilizing materials to situate a piece or hold it up, a base that was a little bit more than a base, that contextualized the piece or suggested a contextualization. So most of what I'm going to show you here, like there's many pieces that refer to the last slide and this slide, but a couple examples as we go along here. After I left Tennessee, or getting ready to leave Tennessee, I was packing up a truck full of work, a big truck, like a 21-foot U-Haul to haul lots of stuff, private possessions, and all the art I made out there back to Sacramento. Speaking of which, I lived in Sacramento for quite a while, and William was referring to me feeling to him like one of the community here, and it's true, I was very much a part of the community for so long. Even though I live in the Bay Area now. Anyway, this head form on this figure, I had one that I never completed, was sitting on a workbench, and as I'm packing the truck and walking back and forth through my studio, I kept seeing that form isolated from the figure and realized how much I like it, as simple as it is. And here it is, of course, substituting as a head for a figure. But I decided that when I got back to California and situated, I was going to build that form large. And so, and it wouldn't be a head, it'd just be an object, a form. So this is one of them. This has a kind of, I'll try not to get into too many stories because we'll never get through these slides and you guys will get bored. But on the other side of this piece, down near the bottom, there's a hole about 6 inches in diameter in that piece. And I made all these in a basement of a studio and hauled them up out of a basement, up a hillside, and put them into a truck laying down on their sides, unfired, and they're quite thin, about a 1/4 inch thick, these walls, and then transported them without breaking them. But this one had a tarp that was protecting it from rain, hammering on it over and over and over and over like that, and it beat a hole in the bottom of it. So this was in a large show right here at the Crocker many years later. It was a survey show, and people would come up to me and say, "God, that hole is so mysterious." And you know, the placement of that was just so good. How did you figure that out? And I said, you know, that's what we do. Anyway, here's some from that same series. This is at this is in Italy, an exhibit in Italy. And these pieces here are, obviously they're being built, but they're in Esquire Plaza, right here in Sacramento on 16th Street. So I did full-scale paintings of them that were right behind them to get the scale right. And then here they are installed. This is the making of the forms that were going to be cast in bronze for a piece that's right here on Capitol Mall. And I don't usually put these pictures of process in, but I just thought it was kind of interesting. There's a lot of carving of wood. Oh, and so at a certain point, I fell in love with wood kind of quite by accident, started messing around with it, and it sort of overtook me. And I used to be known as a ceramic artist almost solely, and then I started working with wood and spent more energy for quite a few years making things out of wood, ultimately doing some of both and other mediums. But this is that piece being built to scale, and then was cast right here in Sacramento. And there it is on right down the street here. I've had a lot of shows here at the Crocker Art Museum. This is a mask. Somebody gave me a mold. It was one of my own students who was going away to graduate school on the East Coast, and it was made from a Melmac bowl, or just a plastic bowl. It was about this big around, oval. And I said, I don't want that mold. I don't use molds. I'm kind of pure. I make things, from scratch. But it ended up in my studio one day when I was working on large, time-consuming pieces that take weeks to make. I'd try to fill in with something more spontaneous to kind of fill the voids of time while I'm waiting for clay to set up. And I saw that mold underneath a workbench, and I pulled it out. I slapped some clay in it, made a fun little mask form, and ended up having just a great time making mask after mask after mask. So here's a couple, and then this is from an installation here at the Crocker about 40 years ago. And this is an installation, one angle of a survey show that the Crocker Art Museum put on. Jan Dreisbach was a curator here for a long time. Her husband also taught printmaking at Sac State with us. And there was a survey show that chronicled 20 years of ceramics up to that point. And here are some of those objects. You get a sense of the scale of those meteorite-like things there in the foreground. Why did I put this in here? Let's see. This is a painting. So that illness I had when I was 16 years old, it put me in bed for 6 months. It returned when I was 32 years old, exactly 16 years later. And I missed a whole year of teaching here at Sac State. And when I recovered, at least enough to go into the studio, I couldn't stand for long periods of time. And I couldn't do like real physical work like ceramics would entail. So I decided to paint. And I painted for a better part of a year. And you know, I could stand for quite a while and paint and then sit down on a stool or whatever. And I'm trying to remember, there's a reason why I put this particular image in here. This is an 8-foot square canvas. I guess it's because it led to a series of ceramic masks. This is an example where there's a profile, and then emanating out of the surface of the profile is a kind of a spirit mask or a death-like mask, another aspect of the persona. And so I did a handful of these, and I became more interested in the mask central there, the one that's in high relief, not unlike that painting. That's why I put that painting in there, because I realized when I was putting these slides together that painting actually predated these pieces. So then I began to just isolate that form and make these mask-like forms. And it's kind of weird. This piece on the left was made in like 1983 or 84, something like that. And about every 5 years, I would do another batch of them and try to explore again, always changing the form. And the patterns, of course, are endless in how they vary depending on how many, you know, how close I put the lines. All those lines are painted on with a brush also, you know, not to, you know, over talk about technique or labor, but they're very labor intensive. Once went to San Antonio, Texas, got out of the airport, out of the terminal, walked across the parking lot, was covered with crickets. I mean, thousands upon thousands of dead crickets from a cricket infestation. And I was asked to go into a studio there and do some drawings on some big plates that actually my wife was doing a workshop down there at the San Antonio Arts Center and wanted me to do some drawings on these plates. And I would scratching my head trying to think what to draw on these big, nice porcelain plates. I'm looking down at the floor and I'm seeing all these dead crickets on the floor. So I picked one up and I did a drawing of this cricket. And that led to a whole series of work where there was, you know, crickets involved, which is kind of weird. Sandy and I taught at Indiana University for a year, took a leave of absence from Sac State. And this is one piece I made there. It's about 7 feet tall. Yeah, it says that right there. This belongs to the Crocker Art Museum. It's called Piedmont. Yeah. I was kind of interested in how, chairs resemble a figure, and a figure fits in a chair, and that kind of, similarity. So I made this, and then right around this time, I discovered wood. I actually made a medicine chest for a bathroom in a warehouse that we bought in Berkeley, California, and I ended up kind of cutting a figure out of the door or whatever. I just fell in love with the material wood and had never worked with it before in my life. So I started working with wood, kind of put clay on the back shelf for a while, and tried to take this piece and translate it in a completely different way to a wood figure. So here's an example of a few of these. I did an exhaustive series of these from little to large. These are well over 6 feet tall. I'm not interested in trying to talk about what these things mean, because I'm not even sure what they mean. And for me, the form and trying to think, proportion, just all the factors that go into creating something kind of beautiful and wonderful are what interests me, and the meaning is, less important to me. So one of the first things I did when I started making wood pieces, I made an angel, and it kind of it unnerved me. I thought, why am I making an angel? I thought an angel referred to that they were religious, and so I kind of abandoned that. And later on, I learned that angels are part of many, many religions, not just Christianity. And it kind of freed me up to reapproach that. And it was a nice way of making figures that didn't have arms and the typical parts of a body. The wings became very expressive. And then, even airplanes. I made airplanes. This is quite a large piece, about 8 feet tall. This is a figure 5 feet wide or so. So kind of endless abstraction of the figure just is what really interests me, proportions and variations that create a certain kind of poetry, in my eye anyway. I made a whole series of pieces that involved a cathedral on the figure after a trip to Italy. This is in the Crocker Art Museum. It's called a lute, like an Aleutian Indian. I grew up in Reno, Nevada, so the Donner Party is a kind of a big part of local history up there. So anyway, this is reflecting on the Donner Party. I heard a story about somebody who got a really powerful verdict passed to them, and I imagined, the heaviness of that verdict, and so I made this piece where the book with the word verdict on the binding of it is being held at the neck, kind of like stocks. The figures in stocks are incarcerated. The arms are long because the emotional power of the verdict that changed this person's life. And then there's a boat form for the base that indicates some sort of shift in their life. For a long time, I tried to make bases for pieces that one is more literal, but that create a context, something more than just a pedestrian way of holding a figure up. Did a lot of weaving of rattan into figures, into wooden forms. So this is a large piece here. This is called fid, F-I-D. And a fid is an object that a sailor uses to part the strands of rope on a rope, and then to retie them in a way that is wanted. It's a sailor's tool, and I was in the Navy, and I just thought it was a beautiful form. The thick end fits in the palm of the hand, and the pointed end is what parts the rope. Of course, this is enlarged. I did a whole series of pieces that are hollowed out wood pieces. This is about 40 inches long and about 10 or 11 inches in diameter at the largest point there, and very hollow, so if you rub it, and those are holes in it up there, it has an auditory kind of sound to it. Even though I have a history of ceramics, I thought for years about mixing the two materials, clay and wood, but nothing ever came to mind that seemed to be unforced, but I have made a few things that were successful, I think. So this obviously is clay and wood. It's about 8 feet tall. These pieces kind of came out of just observation of yoga positions, and I did a huge series of these. You know, all these things I'm showing you, there's a whole lot more pieces that related to the piece we're seeing, where series went anywhere from 10 to 20 pieces maybe before I shifted on. This is a photograph by Ed Fishbach, Sacramento photographer of great fame. And I started, I haven't said anything about it yet, but my work has been sort of punctuated from time to time, shifting from the figure to abstraction. And I've been doing that off and on for pretty much as far back as I can remember. The abstract work that I've done over the years is much less popular. It has not created much interest, but I continue to do it anyway. And here's a few forms on the wall. When he came to the studio that day, it's what I was working on, and some that are yet to be fired, some are yet to be built there, but just indicate some of that interest. There are some of them finished on the back wall. And I did about a decade of ceramic pieces that involved these I call them the language series because they remind me of Asian language without any specificity. None of them refer to anything that I've looked at, but I try to make them so that they have some kind of weight and measure and believability. This is just a process shot on the back wall. First, I start with a drawing on paper, a painting on paper, and then make a frame that's down in the foreground there out of wood. And you can see it's fairly complicated frame. And then that will be coated or covered with, it'll be carved so that it's not just equal in thickness from edge to edge. It varies a lot. And then it's covered with a Italian bendable veneer and glued down and then shaped. And there's one piece on the back wall that's finished there. And you can see the drawing for it's on the left side there. And here's some finished pieces. And these were kind of facetious, not facetious, but I lived in Italy for a couple different times. I lived there. I mean, I was there for like several months at a time. And the floor plans for cathedrals are kind of wonderful. Also, I learned about them in art history. And, you know, they're there for a function that functions as the cathedral, but I like them as shapes. And I didn't make these pieces because I want them to speak about religion, but about architecture. As I began to make them, I kind of veered away, further and further away from anything that would resemble an apse or a nave or the main chambers of a church. But that's what inspired them. And they're about 45 inches square, each one. I did a further series, continuing interest in like-kind pieces that were more objective. And this one's really hard to translate, I mean, even in your mind, but it came from seeing a king in a big armchair. I can't even explain it because I can hardly see it myself, but I can kind of. And this is a sort of a cross between a figure and a temple, Asian temple. This is a little piece of metal nailed over a hole on a cabin in the desert. And I like that little shape. And ultimately, I made a wood piece kind of like it, but a little different. And this is about 5 feet tall. And when I made these wood pieces like the ones that are, I'm trying to back up here, not to bore you too much, but they all had to have a seam somewhere. The veneer that I'd use would bend one direction but not the other direction. So, and because the frame varied in thickness all around the edges, it was challenging to get the material to lay flat. So I always had to like cut it open and let it overlap itself and then trim it back until it laid down. And with that, I would end up with a seam in the piece. And the seam, let's see here. The seams are always different where they had to be in order for this material to lay down flat. So each one of them had its own kind of mysterious cleavage in it. I was on a motorcycle trip, and off in the distance, this is in Utah, there's some chalky white cliffs, and I saw the moment a rock slide happened coming from above that chalky cliffs, all these rocks tumbling down and creating shadows or dark spots on that white chalky cliff. And it was just so beautiful. I tried to emulate that in some way. And so that's where this idea came from. It's about 5 feet tall, 4 feet wide. These are wood. This is all wood. I did a series called the Longing series. It was about people who left their home country and tried to adapt to, new culture, new circumstances, but always reflected on their past. And they're not very specific, but these are a few examples. A category that I did off and on many times are birds. I love birds, and making them out of mixed media is just fun to do, and like the results. So these are aluminum and natural fibers and wood, steel. The tallest of these, the first few slides, they're rather small, 18 inches or something. But some of these get about 6 feet tall. This piece lives in Sacramento. It's called Tumble. It's approximately 9 feet tall, I think. Fish, it's another kind of subject that I've used. I guess you'd call it a subject, just a departure point. I've fished a lot in my life, been around fish, and I don't know, I find them interesting. pretty fun making these kind of compositions, a very fish roiling. This one was kind of a comment about pollution of waters and fish having to survive in those polluted waters. It's about 6-7 feet tall. This is also fish. Pretty abstract. In fact, I'm more interested in the forms than I am the fact that there's a fish there. These are some pretty fully abstract pieces that I made. My wife and I have a cabin in Minnesota, and we go out there for the summer, and I work outside, which is kind of difficult because they have a lot of rainstorms there, even in the summertime, thunder showers and stuff. But I have an outdoor studio, and these are made out of just great big chunks of wood from trees that I cut down, utilizing a chainsaw and some chisel work. So they're, tallest one's about 6.5, 7 feet tall. Then there's a large series of more columnar pieces of the same ilk. And this is an image of a piece that'll be at Barry Sakata's gallery in a couple of weeks. And in fact, there's a postcard right here of that very piece. And I'm just going to finish it up here with a few kind of more playful scale things. I like to work at every scale, from small tabletop things up to pieces that are difficult to pick up or even beyond. So it's all fun to me. There's a company called Bemis, B-E-M-I-S, in Omaha, Nebraska. It's not a company anymore, but it was a company. It's a 5-story building. There's also a counterpart in Seattle, Washington. And Bemis made bags, B-A-G-S, bags, just for the sole purpose of farmers putting their seeds in them to sell their seeds, to take them to market or whatever. That's all they made. Bemis bag works. So at a barn sale in Minnesota last summer, a couple summers ago, I bought a bunch of these old Bemis bags, and they're wonderful, wonderful kind of coarse canvas. And this patch that's on that piece, on the frame square there, is a patch that was made by probably the wife of the farmer. When it got a hole in it, she sewed that on there. So I didn't put that on there. I did sew that structural, thing there. But I did a whole bunch of these. I'm just going to show you a couple of them. But and some of them have a word that's printed on them and stuff. But anyway, just some playful pieces, wire and wood. It's about 3 feet tall. And this is the last slide. This is a shoe hanging on a wall at Barry Sakata's gallery in his office, I believe, if it's still there, but it was for a long time. That's where the picture was taken. And he used to make all of his postcards for his upcoming shows by hand in really inventive ways. And this is one way he did it, by stamping on ink or paint with a tennis shoe on, and then stamping on the piece of paper to send out for an announcement. It's kind of funny, I think. It's great. Anyway, thanks. I'm a little clumsy today, but I appreciate you. Thank you very much. And I really do want to thank the Crocker for having me today. I did do this a number of years back. I can't even remember, but this exact same thing, and I'm kind of surprised I was invited back. Not because I did a bad job. I think probably did better then, but the Crocker Art Museum and I go back, as I earlier alluded to, a long, long ways. And number of pieces that I showed you today are in the collection here. I didn't cite that each time I showed them to you, I don't think. But anyway, I have a really, really strong place in my heart for the Crocker Art Museum and the Sacramento community, period, and particularly the Sacramento art community. So thank you so much. And, yeah, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So we're going to do question and answers. But before we do that, I just, kind of a personal note, one of the pieces that he showed you called the tumbler is 9 feet tall. It resides in Sacramento. It resides in my living room. And it's literally 9 feet tall, and it's these interrelated wooden figures. And Nisa Hayden, who some of you may know, a gallerist in town, was over for lunch one day, and we're walking around, and she looks at that and says, "You don't own a cat, do you?" Right, yeah. So let's do question and answer. Scott Heckes has the microphone. I do ask that you ask the question into the mic because we are videotaping it, and we want to hear the question as well as the answer. Okay.
So questions over here.
Did you stay in touch with your art teacher from high school, and was he able to see your career flourish?
Yeah, I did. That's interesting. Your voice is coming through a speaker right here on the lectern here. Yeah, I tell you, I so love that man. And what I didn't tell you, which is kind of interesting, when I was in high school and started that clay club, he put me and my friends, most of whom were in that picture, in his car with the permission of our parents, of course, and drove us from Reno, Nevada to Oakland, California, and took us to California College of Arts and Crafts, his alma mater, and introduced us to the professors of ceramics there. And we actually got to sit down on the potter's wheels there and try to make a pot for, an hour or two or whatever. And then he took us to the Oakland Museum and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and the DeYoung Museum. It was just a big cultural hit, and we stayed at his mom and dad's house, which is right by Oakland Technical High School, which is 4 blocks from California College of Arts and Crafts. So it was pretty incredible. So every time I would go back to Reno for the summer or for, Christmas vacation or whatever, which I did for quite a few years before I weaned myself off of, I just loved the Bay Area. I stayed down there. I would go see him. And I had so much love and respect and admiration for that man for having talked me into going. He just talked me into going to art school. He worked on it for months. He said, I think you might have some talent. I think you ought to go to art school. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, are you crazy? Like, no, I'm going to be a car salesman. I'm going to work in the casinos or something. I mean, I wasn't defiant, but it seemed so far-fetched, But little by little, he talked me into doing that. So anyway, I'd go back and see him and always, and I would always bring him a piece too at the end of every year, something that I made as a gift. And he became a really powerful alcoholic for reasons I don't really know of his personal life. He got divorced, got remarried, and then ultimately he was actually bludgeoned to death on the streets of Reno, Nevada one night, late, carousing, maybe coming back, I don't know, from drinking or something like that. So it was really sad. But before he did get killed like that, I don't know, he was just sort of vacant. I'd go see him and he just wasn't the same person. So anyway, a great story on one hand and a sad story in the end, yeah.
Other questions? There's one
right down here.
You have an amazing array of work, and it looks like an amazing volume of work for your career and large pieces. And I'm just curious, did you work much with apprentices or students or anything like that?
No. No. Well, I was just trying to think how, a lot of artists I know do get help. And there's something about my process where, I mean, when I go in the studio a lot of days, I know what I'm going to approach and what I'm going to work on, but sometimes I don't. And I have to find that, you know, that starting point. Once I start, this is something that I learned. I'm going to say it like I knew it all along when I didn't, but I've found that I have to work in a sort of a balance of where the ego is put to the side enough to where I'm open to a conversation that occurs between the material, the moment, who knows what, and myself. You know, and that conversation can shift my idea about how to proceed with a given idea compared to what I started off with. I start off with a pretty static, firm idea of what I want to make. And when you make sculpture, especially out of something like wood, clay totally with clay too, but with wood, I mean, if you cut it 3 feet long, it's only going to be 3 feet long. You know, you can try to go back and make it 3.5 feet long by gluing something on it or whatever. But so as I'm working, I will all of a sudden kind of see an opening or a shift that I hadn't previously thought I would see. And I'm trying to get away from that bright light that's up in my eyes up there. To make it better and richer, more, you know, it's just better. So as opposed to, say, if I do a sketch and then I faithfully try to reproduce that, I've found that it's not nearly as good as taking advantage of something that's kind of beyond me, you know, something that's kind of almost beaming down to me and directing me. So I can't have much help because of that. I really can't. You know, I've had some people come and help me do, when I did a lot of clay, the pieces I said were abstract, a lot of them are made from these extrusions of tubes and squares that are made in a hand kind of driven machine. And I get somebody to come maybe and help me for a few days because they wanted to, a student or whatever. But no, I have to do it myself. And it isn't a matter of pride, it's just a matter of no one can do it the way I do it, and no one can stumble along the way I stumble along, you know, or brilliantly stumble along, I will say sometimes, you know.
One more question.
Back here.
Okay.
But I'm getting tired.
Okay. Well, just one more, and then we're...
Hello.
Yes.
Well, that's beautiful art, first of all.
Thank you.
I'm also very nervous. My English goes away when I
If you're
publicly
nervous,
speak.
yeah, okay.
But I wanted to ask you about the pieces that were inspired by immigrants. Was it your personal story when you were in Italy and you felt something that inspired you, or was it somebody else's story?
What piece are you referring to a particular piece?
Yes, about the immigration.
Oh, immigration?
Yes, about the people who are in different country with a background of their own home.
Oh my God, I'm trying to remember what you're
They probably
talking
had
about.
a name, but I'm
Help
bad
me, you
with names.
guys. Which piece?
You've had a pieces with a woman, there were few,
Oh, I know
and
what
a
you mean.
background.
Yes, the Longing series.
Yeah, I think it was wood.
Okay, ask that question again now that I know what you're talking about.
You're torturing me. My question was it your personal inspiration about when you were in Italy and you felt something, you felt homesick, or was it somebody else's story that sparked that?
I'm not sure how to answer it quite. I think it is an empathy for what I observe about people who have had to come to a different country than where they're from and adapt and long for their homeland, even though their homeland was not sustaining for them because of war, because of, who knows, opportunity, something like that. And not so much, maybe actual people that I've actually met and sense that about them, but I think it's more of a observation, you know, which is kind of, some of it's guesswork on my part, but I don't know. That's my answer.
Okay. All right, let's thank Robert for coming.
Oh, thank you.
In case you're not, I'm sorry the question and answer period's over, Miss Sedan. Okay, what's your question?
Bob, do you always keep your studio that clean? 'Cause that's pretty.
You know, I was shocked
question-
when I was shocked when I saw those slides, because I was trying to shake it up a little bit today and put some new slides in there, you know, new images, and I'm going like, wow. I mean, right now I can't even see the back wall. There's so much crap in there. It's just, yeah. No, that, I don't know. I must have dragged it all this way and then took the picture.
So everybody but Suzanne Adan's invited to the reception across the hall because she can't seem to follow rules. And Robert will be there, and he can chat. And he brought, as we mentioned, he brought some catalogs that he's going to make available for free to everyone that wants one. And if you're really nice, he might autograph it. No promises. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.